Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Omer Khalid Butt. Today is the 7th of January 2025 and these are the stories that we'll try to decipher during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the Digital Nation Pakistan Act that was of course put into the parliament in December last year. But it's a very important act. Why is it very important? Because it has many dimensions to it. It has a very important dimension of digital security. It has a very important dimension of making organizations that will oversee digital security of every single citizen as well as the organizations. It has many different sub platforms and other important achievements that it could move forward towards, given the right circumstances and the right boost. This said, that is why we are talking about this as our first story, because this Nation Pakistan Act, Digital Nation Pakistan Act, is a new chapter as far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan's digital arena is concerned, and Pakistan's digital security is concerned. This is going to be our first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the Middle East situation. Today is day 457 of the Israel-Palestine conflict, but of course the number of casualties keeps on increasing, the number of injured continues to increase, as well as the bombardments, as well as the aerial firing, as well as the killing and the butchering by the Israeli forces on the hapless Palestinians, and to add to their misery as far as the lack of food, water, medicine and proper shelter is concerned. This and more will be discussed in our second segment. Then we are going to talk about Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, who has announced that he is going to resign as Prime Minister after a period of 9 years. 9 important, interesting years, but now of course bowing to pressure, he is going to resign. We'll highlight some of his achievements during the course of this third story. And finally, we're going to talk about the Pope, who has named for the first time an Italian sister to lead a major Vatican office. This is the first time that of course the Catholic Church has announced this nomination of none of a lady in such an important post, and that is why we thought it would be important to highlight this. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first, and that concerns the Digital Nation Pakistan Act that was introduced in the parliament in December 2024, but it has many different arenas to it, many different chapters to it, many different plethoras to it, and many different interesting aspects to it that could not only emphasize Pakistan's digital arena but also secure it. We've been joined by Dr. Usman W. Chohan. He's a senior economist to highlight this. He has written one of his books that he has written, of the numerous books that he has written, is in fact on this very domain. So we are very proud to have him in the studios with us. Thank you very much, Usman, to have joined us.
Thank you.
The government is focusing on the promotion of information technology and the digitization to keep pace with the world. A lot of other countries have followed, and Pakistan wants to follow suit as well. In December, the government, as I said in the beginning, presented the Digital Nation Pakistan Act, which aims to secure digital identities for citizens and also strengthen the provision of online services. How important is an act like this in your point of view for a country such as Pakistan, and what are the contours of this act that you feel are extremely important in the 21st century for a country like Pakistan?
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for mentioning the book. It came out in 2021, and one of the main findings is that a country like Pakistan needs to have this. It's a long time coming, so I've been a strong advocate, and I'm very, very happy that the government has done this. The reason is that it creates public value for citizens, and it also creates public value for the government. From the citizen side, when you have all of this information consolidated, it helps to do public policy in a targeted manner that helps the people, and it also, on the other side for government, helps to have data-driven policy, because you know who is whom, where and what. One of the tragedies of the third world is that you don't have enough data about those societies. You don't know how things really work, who lives where, does what. With this kind of system, you will have that possible in a very cost-effective manner to be able to actually deliver public value where it is needed. And if you look at the countries that have things like that, they range from the big emerging markets, which is a family you want to be in, all the way up to the developed nations, which is also a family you want to be in, because they have this digital identity working around the key drivers of how to create value for the people, such as service delivery, such as giving important information to the people, such as knowing where policies need to be implemented, how and at what timeline, how society is changing in real time. These are all possible with such a standardization, compilation, and then usage of data analytics.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the objectives of this act. It aims to establish secure digital identities for citizens. I've talked about that. For delivery of online services, you've also highlighted that. Facilitate economic growth, create new opportunities for both the domestic and foreign investors. Aims to enhance transparency, accountability, efficiency within the government, ensuring online security, contributing to the establishment of a safe digital society, guaranteeing national development, elevating Pakistan's role in the global digital forums and partnerships. Which of the objectives do you feel are more important, or are they all equally important for Pakistan?
You can rhetorically say they're all equally important, but you and I will agree that the most important thing is the citizens of Pakistan. And therefore, the areas where it addresses citizens' requirements are, I think, undoubtedly the most important, where they're able to have their voice articulated just through their demographic presence, which is known, recorded, and then used for policy delivery. The second is that we have long talked about having digitization as a factor. Digitization really boils down to this, because what you have is sets of disparate data in Pakistan, not conjoined. FBR has something of yours, the FIA will have something, etc. The SBP, the private banks, but to have something that is at the root of all this, that merges things together, is very important. And I'm glad you also mentioned, because this is not considered enough, the FDI portion of it, because you have to have multinationals know what size of market they're dealing with. How can you splice it by gender? How can you splice it by age groups? How can you splice it by urban versus rural? Those are actually very valuable points of data, and oftentimes people just declare things up in the air without any empirical backing. This is that empirical backing that we need for investment, which is not just foreign, actually, it's also domestic investment is optimized through this knowledge.
Now, as per the vision of this act, the data of every citizen is going to be safely integrated in a central platform so that better services can be provided to the citizens. How can this safety be ensured in your point of view?
There's many ways to do it, and I know that the government has thought carefully about that, because the risk is enormous. If you are able to hack into a national database of any country, you have a treasure trove that you can exploit, violate, and it's very terrible. That's why even countries that you would consider not the most tech savvy do put a lot of effort into this stuff to make sure that this database is never compromised. Now, I also think there's new technologies that can bolster this in a cost-effective manner, such as blockchain, because it's a digital registry, but you don't need to go that far. There are more rudimentary and still equally efficient ways to keep things tracked in a central database, so long as the cybersecurity around it. Cybersecurity is always an ongoing process and a cat and mouse game. So you always have to maintain it, always have to make sure things are up to date, and then it works out. Because national databases in this are just too sensitive to let go of. You have to protect them at all costs.
All right, Usman, when part of the vision of this program is also to have innovative service delivery models for robust digital public infrastructure and responsible use of data. Do you feel our new generation, or those who will be involved in this new act or the implementation of this act, also need to be properly trained in the different maneuverings of digital data, so that things move along or are streamlined properly?
Absolutely. At CAS, where I work normally, there is a lot of work done on cybersecurity, and one of the findings is that most countries don't have a sufficient awareness of cybersecurity, and that includes Pakistan. And for that, you have to have that promotional awareness, which is two parts. The general awareness needs to exist that this is something valuable and therefore must be protected. Citizens have to know that. But then you also need the technical expertise at all fronts to know that actually this is something that must be guarded above all things, because data privacy is the wealth generator, but also something that is a resource most exploitable in the 21st century. Therefore, both the technical experts as well as citizens need to be aware of the cyber sensitivities around this.
The bill says it is expedient to create a forward-looking digital society, foster a thriving digital economy, establish a collaborative digital governance ecosystem. How can the bill achieve these goals?
The bill is quite comprehensive in the sense that it looks at both the economic elements as well as the governance elements. You can actually split that, although they are synergistic. The economic elements involve how you will have access to credit, how people, you can look at their economic histories, how buying purchases happen, so especially if it's integrated with things like FBR and SPP. Look at how things are moving in terms of economic activity, which helps with public policy, even optimization of policy rates, things like that at a very advanced level can be done with the data analyzed properly. And at the same time, the governance elements in terms of transparency, so it's much easier to track how delivery of things is happening, and therefore saying, well, some parts are doing better than others, and looking at comparative analysis of the various portions of machinery. All of that is done better through a digital framework, and the bill looks at that. Of course, when you look at bills like this, there is that buzzword element, and you'll have innovation, governance, sustainability, etc. But behind that has to be the spirit, and I believe that that is reflected. And oftentimes with digital and initiatives like this, the work speaks for itself. So we can put aside that rhetoric and look at how concretely this will work, and I believe that there's no better reform for Pakistan than to have a digital national identity to streamline things.
Now, there are three bodies that the Bill Act says are going to be implemented or formed: the National Digital Commission or the NDC, the Strategic Oversight Committee or the SOC, and the Pakistan Digital Authority or the PDA. Let's begin with the NDC. Now, the NDC, as per the bill, will prescribe the required policy, provide governance, assure coordination amongst all the different bodies, whether they be federal or whether they be provincial or sectoral, and align national digital transformation with economic growth. And also it adds, I'm just adding a lot of things, but I want your opinion on that. It will also have to approve the National Digital Master Plan and the implementation plans, provide a strategic direction and governance to the PDA, that is the third body, and coordinate with all the relevant governments as well as the sectoral bodies to ensure a unified and collaborative approach to digital transformation. How can all of this be streamlined in an effective manner?
Yes, there is a lot of terminology there which may seem abstract, but one way to frame this is in terms of Pakistan's solid track record on certain key areas where coordination was required. An example is the NCOC, which happened during COVID, and that became the nerve center for how you were going to do targeted interventions. And so we didn't have to do sweeping measures that would affect the people in a negative way. For example, you had smart lockdowns and things like that. It's sort of the same element here, where if you have a nerve center for this digital master plan, you can actually see it happen appropriately and on time. The digital master plan emphasizes that there are stages to this. You can't have it overnight, and therefore you have to make sure that all steps are followed. We will probably do it at a faster rate and accomplish the tasks faster than other countries did.
Why and how come?
But the reason is that there has been a lot of observations from other countries and lesson drawing for other countries which can be implemented in a better way. I'll give you an example. This Aadhaar program started in India in 2013. By 2016 it was really started, and only now do you see the effect. So that's a huge timeline. Brazil similarly had something in the early 20th century, and then it lagged for a while until they said, no, we'll finally digitize it. So the gaps in this tend to be quite far apart. Here we have a master plan which condenses it, and that's why it'll happen at a faster rate. And I think that's well deserved, because we're also starting a little bit later than other countries.
How long will such a national digital master plan be able to be properly put into action in your point of view? If you, you said that it will take faster for Pakistan, but how fast? Once this plan or this, this whole act is implemented and, okayed by all the different policymakers, how long?
I think that irrespective of what the master plan says, we should look at it as a 5-year horizon. That is my personal view on this, because they're hitting the ground running, and a lot of the infrastructure that is needed for this already exists. It's just a consolidation effort and a digitization effort. So because you have all the right raw materials already, things in disparate areas, we all have CNICs, a lot of the stuff that's needed is there, but the compilation of it, within 5 years you'll see that, and after that there's a lot of follow-up. The follow-up, I know that the immediate deadlines are much shorter than that, but because there is an oversight and follow-up follow apart, I consider it in a 5-year term. And the cybersecurity element means that it will always be an ongoing thing. Your high population rate means that new names will be added to the registry all the time. So whatever the master plan says, this should be considered a kind of vertex and a vertex and a spinal cord for how our economy works in terms of citizens. That's why I think the master plan is very important.
All right, Usman, also let's talk about the Pakistan Digital Authority, which is the third organization. I will move towards the SOC a bit later. The PDA, as per the bill, is going to develop, implement, monitor and update the National Digital Master Plan that we've just talked about, and it will include sectoral plans and implementation plans, and it will ensure alignment with the guidelines as provided by the NDC. How important is it for both the NDC and the PDA to be in sync? Is it an easy task? Will it be a bit difficult in the beginning? How do you foresee this?
Well, you could make the argument that these could be consolidated into one. I think that is a robust argument, because if it's a nerve center, then the nerve center should operate on that. But the fact is that execution is best delegated at a more micro level. That is why the PD exists, and that there's an equally robust argument for that, because there's an oversight element, there's a continual process involved with that. Those execution elements come under the PDA, whereas the nerve center is looking more strategically at things. So if you split the strategic and tactical, there is merit to that. Some may argue that it's better to consolidate it. Those are matters of opinion, but I'm sure that this was considered in our local context and considered more appropriate to have an authority on one side, nerve center on the other, and they, as you asked, have to be in sync all the time. The real-time element is very important.
That is very important. Also, another very important thing on which it is more or less based is the digital identity for each citizen, and it will include the data on individuals' health, assets and other social indicators, and this is to improve access to departments who are managing ID cards, for example land records, birth certificates and health records. In your point of view, why is clarity needed around digital identity when other countries have implemented similar programs? Isn't, in your point of view, the aim to establish a unified digital identity for citizens, aiming to centralize the social, economic and governance data?
Well, the way you have framed the question is perfect, because there are no two opinions about having better coordination for service delivery. Everyone will agree on that. The questions that have occurred in other countries have gone around voluntary participation in this, or the state's role in the citizen's life. Those are democratic and philosophical debates. So, for example, in India, the Aadhaar was challenged in the Supreme Court, and it is a voluntary thing. You can actually opt out of it. But given Pakistan's condition, I think it is very important for everybody to be on the same page. And then we see the merits of this. It's more obvious, because that philosophical thing of opting out has actually meant disenfranchisement. That's the other side of the coin. And in order for inclusivity and sustainability to be a part of our economic mindset, you have to have everybody on the same page. And service delivery will happen in a much more efficient manner because of this. So other countries have their own considerations. I understand there is a democratic question as well about the state's intrusion and all that. But I also believe that in order for us to optimize public value, this has to occur. So they're competing values.
How do you satisfy the critics?
I don't really know what the critics here would be worried about, because I'm giving the example of India and Brazil. Those are different. I think that everybody seems to value the fact that you're streamlining and having service delivery here. If there are people here who worry about the state's encroachment, it may not be this that is the subject of their grievances.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the SOC, the Strategic Oversight Committee, which is going to be headed by the IT and Telecommunications Minister, with secretaries of IT, Finance and Planning, and representatives of the SIFC, and 4 representatives from the private sector as well as its members. Now, the committee is going to monitor the PDA's performance, that is the Pakistan Digital Authority's performance, and will provide a review to the Apex Commission. Now, in your point of view, is this new legislation essential to have all the relevant stakeholders, including the provinces, on one platform to implement the national digitization agenda? Because we know whenever there is something new that comes on the market or on the horizon, everybody says all stakeholders need to be on the same page. So in this case also, how important is that?
It's of critical importance, because what this is addressing is of the primordial consequence. Primordial in the sense that you begin from the national identity, your participation as an individual within a sovereign, and that is at the crux of your existence within a society. So because it is so much at the root of everything, therefore it needs to be given the utmost importance. If this was legislation dealing with a particular economic or political issue, perhaps you can have disagreements and different views on it, but that's because they are peripheral to the question. The core question being, who are you as a citizen in a state? So that's what this is addressing. Since this is of such utmost consequence, it needs to be done. And I am glad that the PTA will have a multidimensional oversight body for its performance as well. As you mentioned, there's some private sector presence and so on. That is needed to make sure that this follows the timeline. So the way they've structured in terms of governance makes sense that you do follow that master plan we mentioned earlier.
Now, do you feel that these three entities that I've talked about, the National Digital Commission, the Strategic Oversight Committee, and the Pakistan National Digital Authority, rather, be established under this bill, ensure that digitization plans are implemented properly in all spheres, including the state functionaries and the citizens?
Absolutely, because many economists will tell you, and many social scientists in general will tell you, that the way for service delivery happens in the third world is inefficient, and that there is an NOC culture that blockades the interaction of business with the state, private sector with the state, as well as citizens with the state. There is a lot of pushback when direct head-on reforms have been done. 75 years show that here, where head-on attacks are always buttressed by bureaucratic entrenchment. It's very hard to do that. Here you're working around the problem and saying, well, why would you need so much bureaucracy anyways? And you can streamline things for the betterment of people. Then if you want these bureaucrats and you want to pay their pensions, that's fine. But in terms of the citizens having access to the state, that is far more important than how things are structured, because so much of our state's structure is a legacy from the 1800s, and we need to live in the 2000s, or the 21st century more accurately. That's why this structure, having workarounds, is very, very important in the 21st century.
Thank you very much, Usman, to have come all the way and to have discussed this interesting but very difficult issue to decipher for a common layman, even like myself, to understand what the different paradigms of this act is and how can this be properly implemented in order to appease everybody, to cater to every single segment of the society. Thank you very much again, Usman, to have joined us.
Thank you.
Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the Middle East, and of course today's day 457 of the Israel-Palestine conflict. As we speak, a lot has happened. Even now, as we speak, Israelis' relentless bombing of Gaza continues. 6 people, including a child, killed in its latest attacks on residential buildings, taking the toll from assaults on Monday to at least 45,854 Palestinians have been killed and 109,139 have been wounded since the 7th of October 2023. The United Nations chief in the relief section, Tom Fletcher, says efforts to save the lives of survivors in Gaza is at breaking point because of continued Israeli attacks on aid workers, including an assault on a World Food Programme convoy this very Sunday, and the collapse of law and order in the war-torn enclave. Also, Israel's military has launched a manhunt in the occupied West Bank after gunmen killed 3 Israelis near an Israeli illegal settlement, rather, in the Kalkia Governorate. U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein says the Israeli military will withdraw completely from South Lebanon after it withdrew from another of the nearly 60 border villages its troops are currently present in. We have been joined by 2 guests to discuss this in detail. One is in the studio, the other joins us online from across the 7 seas. We have Dr. Farah Naz, who is a foreign affairs analyst and expert, right here with us in the studios. Farah, thank you very much to have joined us. And we have Matthew Bryza, who is a former ambassador, White House, and senior State Department official, who joins us online. Matthew, thank you very much to have joined us as well. Let's begin with you, Farah. Israel's bombing of Gaza continues. I mean, I can go on and on how many people have been killed in shelter areas, in small villages, and the majority are women, the majority are children, and the majority are people who are hapless, who are not the terrorists that are claimed by the Israelis. It has been so many days that there is a lack of access to food, water, medicine, and proper shelter. 8th baby has died of hypothermia, that is because of the cold. There is not enough shelter or enough clothes to warm the child in. What are you foreseeing? What's going to happen? 457 days, Farah. What is going to happen in the next couple of weeks?
Thank you, Omer, for bringing this important issue to the show. Well, if we look into the Israeli leadership, how they are looking into it, what are their comments on? They just said it's not the end of the war, it's the beginning of the end. Which is very interesting to note, that still they think that it's the beginning of the end. They are looking beyond this war, this genocide, whatever they have done to the people of Gaza. So far we all are witness to it, that the lives of women, children, like anyone, like even if we look into the religious distribution, churches have been destroyed, mosques have been destroyed, people who are serving with the United Nations, they have been targeted. But still, like, this satisfaction element is not coming to the Israeli leadership, where they say enough of the damage we have caused to the people over here, and they have whatever they wanted to achieve, they have already achieved it in terms of, destroying all the infrastructure, destroying the life of the people in Gaza. Now, if I look into the October 7th scenario, and through which all of this developed, this was the story of Hamas and Netanyahu and Israel in particular. So have they targeted all Hamas leadership? Yes, they have the potential, they have the capability to hunt them down, to target them. They have done it, and they have shown it the way they targeted them in Iran and even in elsewhere as well. So if they want to target them, they can do so. Why there is a need to kill so many people? Why there is a need to bring all the buildings down and make it like a graveyard? What is the point of that, where even the dead bodies in the cemeteries are not safe anymore? So this kind of ask me to question, is this their objective, to target Hamas, or their objective is beyond it? To me, it's beyond it. They just want to clean the territory of Gaza from the people of Palestinians, and they just want them to either run away, which they unfortunately cannot, because all borders have been shut down on them. They cannot flee. So then I think about whether the objective is to kill them altogether, then what will be happening? Because now I can see even they are putting pressure on UNRWA not to provide help and support to the people who are affected in this genocide. So this takes me directly towards thinking on the lines that they want to clean this territory from mankind. So probably they want to bring people of their choice, who they're going to settle down in Gaza and who is going to live their life according to the dictation they receive from Israel, rather than you as a people in Gaza or Palestinians who demand their rights, their freedom of speech and all those things. That is the due right of any person who lives under the sovereignty of a particular territory. So they do not want to acknowledge that. This is what I can foresee at the moment.
The greater plan is in place, and it is moving along as per the directives of the Israeli government and the Israeli lobby. Matthew, in all of this conundrum, where do you see the peace deal between Hamas and Israel? There is one on which talks are going on for a ceasefire in Qatar, and there is also talks of, there have been rumors that 34 captives will be set free by the Hamas side, which will be mostly consisting of women and children, or maybe the elderly. And at the same time, we have Israel that is denying that. Then comes the whole point, the sticky points as far as these ceasefire agreements are concerned, whether it be on the captives, the end of the war, Palestinian prisoners, or the return of Palestinians to their homes in Gaza. Both the Hamas side or the Israeli side are not really looking at the same page when it comes to these points. What are the expectations this time from the ceasefire deal?
Yeah, thank you, Omer, for letting me be here with you and together with Farah. I'm honored to be with you. And nobody knows what the expectations are, what the likelihood is. There's hope. As Secretary of State Blinken said, he hopes that the ceasefire will be reached within these next 2 weeks, which means, while he's still the Secretary of State. But I have to say, he doesn't sound particularly optimistic. And you outlined what the sticking points are, right? How many of the 34 hostages actually are alive? Hamas has asked for more time to identify and gather up the hostages. They're demanding the release of hundreds of Palestinians in Israeli prisons, and the Israelis haven't agreed to that, as you said as well. The Hamas is saying Israel needs to not just put in place a temporary ceasefire, but end the war and withdraw its troops from Gaza. And then Israel, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, is saying this is only the beginning of the end of the war. So a ceasefire is only a ceasefire, and God willing, may it happen, so those poor hostages can be released. But it does seem, based on everything you and Farah were just discussing, that Israel maybe doesn't have a strategic goal. It has for sure, in my mind, a quasi or a half strategic goal, which is to make Gaza uninhabitable. You wouldn't destroy the healthcare system so systematically. You wouldn't make it impossible for the Gaza Palestinians to get dry mattresses, tents, food aid. You wouldn't systematically destroy so much of all of the infrastructure in the buildings if you believe that the Palestinians would need to rebuild their lives in Gaza. But that's not a strategic goal, right? That's what's going to happen to all those people. Where are they going to go? What's the strategic plan for Israel after the ceasefire is in place? I don't know, and I don't know that they know. I think that Israeli policymaking is a battle between the more extreme members of Netanyahu's cabinet, like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and others who realize, oh my gosh, this is a human tragedy, this war in Gaza, and it's destroying Israel's reputation and therefore strategic position globally. And that's just Gaza. There's also the West Bank, where it does seem like the plan right now is for Israel to make life as uncomfortable as possible for the Palestinians in the West Bank and expand Israeli settlements. I think with the ultimate goal of getting all Palestinians out of the West Bank. But the question is, again, where do they go? And there's not an answer to that question.
Lot of answers that remain unanswered, a lot of questions rather that remain unanswered, and I don't know how things are going to play out, but the way things are playing out as we speak, as Farah also pointed out, Matthew, is that this is exactly what the both of you also are joining their points of view on, and that is that Israel wants more and more territory in its favor for its people, for its settlers. Farah, what happens to UNRWA? The Israeli Knesset has banned it starting from January 2025, but it is the major organization that has been sending aid or giving aid to the people in Palestine. But looking at the current situation, where, as Matthew pointed out, almost all the hospitals are destroyed. The little hospitals that still work are almost devoid of supplies, of medicines. To add to that, all other infrastructure buildings are also destroyed. The camps, the shelters are also being destroyed, and so are the children, women, and elderly. What's your take as far as humanitarian aid and humanitarian future of Palestine is concerned?
Well, it's not only about UNRWA. Even journalists are targeted the same way. There's a large number of people from the media sector across the world. They have been targeted. So I think we all agreed upon that it's not a plan where they're talking about how to target Hamas over there. It's the elimination of the people in Gaza, and then trying to establish something which is per the desire of the Israel over there. So if I look into UNRWA, the way they have been targeted by Israeli forces, it's by design, for sure, because they do not want that aid and support and medicine and supplies and foods and all those things that are necessarily require in times of war and conflict be reached to the people in Gaza, because they want them to die either through bullet or through hunger or through the lack of medicine. So this is by design. UNRWA, they have already decided that they're going to be banned, which is a very big question mark on the humanitarian assistance programs at international level that exist in times of crisis, in times of war, in times of conflict, or in times of genocide, the way it is taking on in Palestine, and particularly in Gaza at the moment. So that takes me back to understand what would be the definition of humanitarian assistance then. How they're going to be countries of power where, with all due respect, America is very strongly supporting Israel in it. That's why they are providing them a lot of equipment, a lot of weapons. Along with that, even like money is also supplied to them, so they can purchase more and more weapons and they can utilize them in this war and conflict. So in all of this, if a powerful country like Israel and a superpower that happens to be United States is in support of such war, what will be the consequences for the United Nations and its entities and agencies? That's a huge question mark that this war has highlighted to the world, where you are going to count on and on whom you are going to count on if there is a problem that's coming on your way, or if you are fighting against the will of a stronger power like Israel and the United States. So things are very shady. This is leading towards lots of questions to be raised and to be answered by all these powerful institutions and humanitarian assistance programs. They have to revisit their schedules, their agendas, and all their clauses that they have introduced for the people like Gaza whose life have been affected. What I can see in the future, I don't see any aid coming their way. I don't see any humanitarian aid, even medical aid, and all those sort of supplies that are required by the people in Gaza. So their life is going to be affected more and more. Like whatever we can see now is going to be multiplied 10 times or even more than that. Who is going to rescue them? Is it going to be some other entity who is going to come down from probably some other planet who is going to rescue them? Because on the earth I don't see any entity who is in a position to help and support them and to rescue them from these genocidal acts of Israel, what they are committing against the people in Gaza.
All right, Matthew, if all the organizations are inefficient, where does that leave the United Nations and its other agencies like the ICC, like the ICJ? We all remember how the rulings of the ICC and the ICJ as far as the Israeli leaders or this labeled as genocide, whatever is happening in Palestine. That is why soldiers are, evacuating or running away from other countries where this law could be applicable of the ICC or the ICJ. But my broader question is, what is the efficacy now under the current circumstances of the United Nations, its sister organizations, the ICC and the ICJ, and how can such organizations be put back into the limelight as far as working towards proper humanitarian rights is concerned?
That's a gigantic question. I think the answer is that the UN is really broken. And number one, when it comes to the ICJ or the International Criminal Court, a little bit different, but they have no enforcement mechanisms. And the same with the United Nations and the Security Council, there is no enforcement mechanism. So even though the resolutions of the Security Council are the highest expression of international law, often those Security Council resolutions simply go ignored and unenforced. I spent much of my career in the South Caucasus. I was the U.S. mediator of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and there were 4 resolutions passed in the 1990s demanding something happen, Armenia withdraw its troops from Azerbaijani territory, and they were simply ignored for decades. And so here, or in Turkey, for decades, on the agenda of the United Nations has been UN reform. And here in Turkey, President Erdogan has a slogan which is that the world is bigger than 5. And obviously what he means is that the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council have way more power today than is merited. They're the 5 biggest powers in 1945 at the end of World War II. You can see how broken the Security Council mechanism is, number one, because of so many other countries in the world that have risen to such prominence, to such power, whether it be Germany or Turkey or India or Pakistan, a growing power, or Brazil. There are so many countries that are excluded from that structure. Vietnam is a huge country that isn't involved in the Security Council, and the Security Council's functions itself are delegitimized when you get, either in the eyes of everybody looking at what's happening to the Palestinians, the ability of the United States and the readiness of the U.S. to veto all those resolutions if they go against Israel, or in the case of Ukraine, where a permanent member of the Security Council, Russia, is violating the UN Charter and invading and occupying not only Ukraine, but Georgia as well. So the whole system needs to be reformed. The problem is the Security Council members have the most power, and they like things how they are. So I don't know what the answer is, but I know what the problem is. The problem is the UN must be reformed, and the Security Council mechanism that gives those 5 countries such inordinate power isn't right and isn't effective.
All right. Coming to you, Farah, you were giving some statistics as well. More aid workers have been killed this year than any other year on record as per the United Nations. We are talking of the United Nations. More than 12,799 students have been killed, 20,942 wounded by Israel. Medical professionals, 1,057 have been butchered by Israel. And the list, I mean, can just go on and on. Even the Lancet talks about 180,000 casualties, in fact, which is the reality, which once the war ends, it will be ascertained what the actual numbers are. The number of journalists that have been killed is 220 as we speak. A lot of, I shouldn't use the word benchmarks, but I have to use it. New benchmarks have been established as far as genocide is concerned, as far as brutalities is concerned, with this very conflict in Palestine, and now that is also now going to other areas. Will humanity learn in the next couple of decades? Will our future generations understand the gravity of the situation that engulfed the Middle East?
If I look into the future and understanding conflicts and probably even teaching conflicts, because I belong to academia, I can't say that if there is a war, these are the entities who's going to help and support, because there will be questions coming on my way that what did the entities do when there was a war in Gaza, when there was a genocide in Gaza, when all those people, innocent civilians, were targeted, they were hunted down, but nobody came forward to help and support them. I think I can't say that yes, there will be entities who will be supporting them. It's a game, it's a show of power. Whoever is more powerful, they are going to have their say established in the world, unfortunately. And the more aggressive you are in your policies towards achieving your desired objectives, they are going to be successful. So probably the theories that so far we have been teaching and we have been learning about, they also need to be revisited. And everything needs to be reformed. All the scenario of the United Nations brings me to understand what would have happened when the League of Nations failed. Probably the same thing. When it was not in a position to bring justice to the people over there, from people I mean states, it was not able to bring everyone together, so there was a need for a new organization to be formed because that organization got flawed. So unfortunately, with all due respect, I have huge sympathy for the United Nations, the way they have been maligned in this entire war, in this genocide. Probably this is also on purpose, because maybe they are trying to get rid of some of the veto members over there. God knows what is on their agenda at the moment. But in the current scenario, I don't see anyone who is going to bring humanitarian assistance to the people in Gaza, because their ultimate objective is to kill everyone and then make it a land where they're going to bring a people of their choice. So if that is the ultimate objective, they don't care what United Nations says, what its clauses, its articles speak about, what is the ICJ directions on such kind of scenarios. They don't care. And all those powerful countries, when they are on the line, who cares about what you think, what I think?
All right.
Unfortunately.
All right. I will ask a very small last question to you, Matthew, but I want a very short answer as well. Bernie Sanders speaks out against the Biden administration's decision to approve the $8 billion in new weapons for Israel. This sale, of course, is going to be likely to be approved by the Congress as well. There have been previous sales as well in August and November to Israel. As somebody who understands the current situation, what's your take on this?
Well, Bernie Sanders is a maverick. He's sort of a Democrat, but he's an independent, and he speaks his mind. And obviously, he's well known as one of the leading American Jewish political voices, and he's speaking the obvious truth. The obvious truth. The United States, as we said in the beginning of this conversation, is the one that is providing the weaponry to Israel to continue this warfare on the people of Gaza. President Biden has the authority, has the ability to shut it off, especially when he's a lame duck president. But he's decided to go all in and not restrain Israel at all. So I think my take is, look at what Donald Trump's going to do. He has said that he's going to end the war. That means he's going to have to pressure Israel, and let's see if he lives up to his word.
All right, let's see what happens after the 20th of January when we have a new president who takes oath. Thank you very much, Matthew Bryza, a former ambassador, White House and senior State Department official, to have joined us. And thank you very much, Farah, Dr. Farah Naz, Foreign Affairs Specialist and Analyst, to have joined us and to have come all the way to the studios. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to end today's show with a very unfortunate news of an earthquake that, of course, wreaked havoc in China as well. We have a correspondent from CGTN in China who joins us all the way from Lhasa, the area where of course this incident has happened and has wreaked havoc. He is none other than Zeng Songwu. He is a CGTN reporter. Let's take you live with him.
The national emergency response level has been raised to 2 this afternoon, and according to the officials, we have good news that the 19 injured people have been sent to the 2 top hospitals in Shigaze city, and medical experts and volunteers in the hospital have been ready to help the treatment, and the officials of the hospitals have prepared 90 sick beds in case of more injuries sent to the hospital. And the epicenter this time is around Tuoguo Township, which is one of the townships in Dingri County in Shigaze city, and there are 27 villages with a population of 6,900, and rescue missions are still underway. And the power supply was restored this afternoon, and the Ministry of Emergency Management of China has dispatched a task force to help the relief efforts, and the Ministry of Finance as well as the Ministry of Emergency Management have urgently allocated 100 million yuan, which is about over $10 million to help rescue missions, search and relocation efforts, as well as secondary disaster prevention. And also the Western China Hospital in southwest China's Sichuan province, which is also one of the top hospitals in China, sent 6 experts this afternoon who have expertise in intensive care medicine, neuroscience, trauma medicine to help the treatment in epicenter. And the Red Cross Society of China has also dispatched more than 4,600 items, including the cotton tents, quilts, as well as warm jackets to help the rescue missions, because it's freezing cold in the evening at the plateau, and the average altitude of the epicenter is about 4,200 meters above sea level, which is also a big challenge for the rescue workers to carry out the rescue missions. And the PLA has also dispatched troops, the first group of more than 750 soldiers, as well as 2 helicopters and 20 rescue vehicles were sent to the epicenter. And 2,200 more soldiers are on standby to help the rescue missions.
Thank you very much, Zeng Songwu, to have joined us. That was Zeng Songwu, reporter from CGTN, giving us a live interpretation of what has happened in China as a result of this earthquake, and how the Chinese government is doing all it can in order to help those who are in need. And our prayers, Zong, go all the way to you and all your Chinese brothers and sisters who have been affected and afflicted by this tragedy. This brings us to the end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with news stories, segments that pertain to us, you in Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.